I want to start this deep dive with a story that, honestly, it sounds like an absolute fever dream.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those things where if I told you this at a bar at like 2 in the morning, you would just tell me to go home and sleep it off.
I mean, I've heard some pretty wild things from you, but all right, I'm intrigued.
But I promise you, this is 100% real. And strangely enough, it sets the exact perfect stage for the absolute madness we are about to uncover today.
Let me guess. Does this involve a certain piece of presidential history that probably shouldn't be in a museum?
It does. It absolutely does. It involves John Kiriakou. Now, before we get to the punchline, and trust me, it is a good one, we really need to set the table on who John Kiriakou actually is.
Right, because if you don't know the name, you might just think he's some random guy with a weird hobby.
Exactly. But his resume is heavy.
Oh, extremely heavy. For anyone listening who might be uninitiated, Kiriakou is a legitimate heavy hitter in the intelligence world. I mean, he's a former CIA officer.
And he wasn't just, pushing paper in a cubicle at Langley.
No, not at all. He was the chief of counterterrorism operations in Pakistan. He actually led the raid that captured Abu Zubaydah.
Which was a massive deal. That was a key al-Qaeda figure.
Exactly. So this is a guy who has been in the field. He has seen the bad guys up close and personal.
Right. And then he became really famous, or maybe infamous, depending on who you ask in D.C.
Definitely infamous in certain circles.
Yeah, as the whistleblower who actually went to federal prison for exposing the CIA's torture program.
So he's seen the darkest corners of the intelligence world, and he has paid a very steep price for talking about it.
Exactly. Serious guy. A guy who genuinely knows where the bodies are buried. So, okay, picture this. This hardened CIA veteran, this whistleblower, is at an auction.
Oh, man, I know exactly what kind of auction this is, too.
Yeah, it's a dime museum auction. One of those places that sells circus freak show memorabilia, shrunken heads, just bizarre stuff. And he sees an item that he decides he absolutely must have.
Please tell me it is a turd.
It is the turd.
I can't believe this is a real story.
It's so real. Specifically, it's a shadow box claiming to contain the quote-unquote final dropping of Abraham Lincoln before he left for Ford's Theater.
You literally cannot make this stuff up. It sounds like a really bad late-night comedy skit.
You really can't.
Yeah.
So Kiriakou is there. He's standing in this auction house, and he actually gets into a bidding war over it.
Over Lincoln's... Wow. God, okay.
And his wife is standing right next to him. She's literally grabbing his arm, digging her fingernails into him, basically saying, John, no, do not buy the Lincoln poop. We are not having this in our house.
That is the voice of absolute reason right there. I'm with his wife on this one.
Right. But he is determined. He bids all the way up to $1,200.
$1,200.
Yeah. He finally bows out, mostly because his wife is probably threatening divorce at that exact moment.
Right.
And the thing eventually sells for $5,000 to someone else.
$5,000 for presidential waste. I mean, that is a market signal of some kind. I just don't know what it means.
Well, here's the punchline. The buyer actually tests it. And it turns out it was made of ingredients that weren't even invented until like 1880.
Oh, my God.
It was a fake turd.
Of course it was a fake, because who collects that? Who even verifies that?
Exactly. But the reason I'm telling you this story, the reason it matters for what we're doing today, is because John Kiriakou is a guy who is willing to chase down the absurd. He has this really dark, almost cynical sense of humor.
Yeah, he even acts in SAG movies now, right? Playing like billionaire tycoon.
He does. And currently, in his own exact words, he is, quote, here to fuck shit up, unquote.
And he's definitely not talking about fake historical artifacts anymore.
No, he is talking about the intelligence community and the Jeffrey Epstein case.
And that transition going from this completely absurd story about Lincoln to the terrifying reality of the Epstein network, that is exactly where we need to live for this deep dive.
Because we are looking at a transcript today of a massive, really sprawling discussion between Kiriakou and Julian Dorey.
Right. And Kiriakou isn't just sitting there sharing funny anecdotes about weird auctions. He sat down to analyze the new dumps of Epstein files.
And his take is very different from what you normally hear on the nightly news.
It completely reframes it. Look, we all have that fatigue, right? You see a headline that says more Epstein files released, and you just roll your eyes.
Yeah, you think, okay, we know the story. Some rich guy went to an island. Terrible things happened. He's dead. End of story. Next topic.
Right. It feels like old news. But the mission of this deep dive is to explore Kiriakou's assertion that our entire timeline and our entire understanding of the scope of this operation is completely wrong.
He is making the case that Epstein wasn't just a pervert with a private island who liked hanging out with famous people.
He argues that Epstein was a sophisticated intelligence peddler. A fixer.
And a fixer whose roots don't just start in the 2000s, but go all the way back to the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s.
Which is a huge paradigm shift. We are going to explore this concept Kiriakou lays out called the super government.
It's wild. It's this structure where the people we think are in charge, the presidents, the prime ministers, are literally viewed as peasantry.
And the real power lies with the people who write the kill lists and broker the global arms deals.
So we are going to cover everything today, from the sheer incompetence of the federal prison system, which honestly might explain exactly how Epstein died,
To the Shadow Commission of 9/11.
and even a looming threat of war with Iran that Kiriakou says is happening right now.
It is a lot to cover, and it is incredibly dark. But I have to say, it connects the dots in a way that very few other sources have even attempted.
And as a quick reminder for you listening, we are just conveying what is in these source documents. This gets into some politically charged territory, touching on both left-wing and right-wing figures.
We aren't taking sides or endorsing these views. We are just unpacking the analysis Kiriakou provided because it is fascinating.
So buckle up. We are going from Lincoln's fake turd to the darkest secrets of the intelligence community. Let's dive into what Kiriakou calls the glitch in the matrix. Let's look at these new Epstein files.
Let's get into it.
One of the very first things that jumps out when Kiriakou talks about these new files is his reaction to the evidence itself. As a former CIA officer, he looks at this stuff and he's almost offended by it.
Offended by the sloppiness, right? He is looking at it purely from a professional tradecraft perspective.
Exactly. I think we all have this image in our heads, probably from spy movies, of international operatives using high-tech encryption, burner phones, satellite uplinks, dead drops in a park.
Very Jason Bourne.
Right. But Kiriakou points to an email address that Jeffrey Epstein used for his quote-unquote covert communications. And the address is JE Vacation.
JE Vacation. It sounds like an AOL screen name a grandfather would set up in 1999 to book a carnival cruise.
It is so banal, it's actually creepy. It's almost insulting to the intelligence community. But it's not just the address itself. It's the content of the emails.
Yeah, Kiriakou highlights the use of these code words. Words like pizza, pasta, cheese, and jerky.
And we should probably pause here and explain tradecraft for a second.
Good idea. So in the intelligence world, if you are going to use code words, the entire goal is to be subtle.
You want to blend in.
Right. You usually try to make the words sound like normal everyday conversations so they don't flag an algorithm or catch the eye of a human analyst reading the intercept. You might say something like, "The package is delivered," when you're actually referring to a person arriving.
But these guys, they were barely even trying.
No, they weren't. There is a specific email Kiriakou flags regarding, quote, jerky classes, unquote.
Jerky classes.
Yes. And one of the emails actually discusses storing jerky in the freezer and treating it, quote, chemically, unquote.
Okay, that is just horrifying.
And now, I cook a lot. I like beef jerky. But I have never in my entire life heard of anyone chemically treating their beef jerky before putting it in the freezer.
And I've certainly never been invited to a jerky class by a billionaire financier.
Exactly. When you look at the context, wealthy, powerful men coordinating specific times to come over for pasta or jerky, it becomes incredibly dark very quickly.
Kiriakou's analysis of this is just blunt. He says these are obvious, incredibly thinly veiled code words for human trafficking victims.
Likely underage victims,
Yeah.
and the chemical treatment they mention, that likely refers to drugs or sedation.
It just makes your skin crawl. But it brings up a really good question. Why the sloppiness? Is it just incompetence? Or is it something else?
Kiriakou suggests it is arrogance. Pure arrogance. That is the glitch he is talking about.
The glitch in the matrix.
Right. Because when you operate with total impunity for decades, when you know the entire system is completely rigged in your favor, you stop whispering.
You just get lazy.
You start talking in a normal voice because you genuinely do not believe anyone will ever read your emails. They didn't think they would ever get caught. They thought they were totally untouchable.
But then, right in the middle of this sordid, gritty detail about jerky and pasta, you get a document that changes the entire geopolitical map of this story.
This is the one that really caught my eye.
Kiriakou flags an email from 2003 involving Ghislaine Maxwell, or G-Max, as they apparently called her in these circles.
This is the Shadow Commission bombshell, and I really want to make sure you listening right now understand the weight of this, because this specific detail gets completely buried in the tabloid stuff.
Set the scene for us.
Oh.
It's 2003. What is happening in the world?
So it's 2003. The United States is reeling from 9/11. We have already invaded Afghanistan. We are actively ramping up for the invasion of Iraq. The entire country is on a serious war footing.
Tensions are sky high.
Exactly. And the official 9/11 Commission is being formed to investigate how the attacks happened.
Right, the Keene-Hamilton Commission.
Which many people, including John Kiriakou, have criticized for years as being a whitewash, a cover-up that ignored foreign involvement, specifically Saudi involvement, and ignored massive intelligence failures.
With this new email.
This email suggests there was a parallel body, a secret body operating completely in the shadows.
The email literally invites Ghislaine Maxwell to join a, quote, shadow commission on 9/11, and it explicitly states in the text that the membership list is secret.
Just think about that for a second. Why would you need a shadow commission for 9/11? And more importantly, why on earth would you invite Ghislaine Maxwell to sit on it?
That's the part that breaks my brain. She's not a policymaker. She's not an intelligence chief. She's a socialite. She goes to galas.
Or so we thought. Now, Maxwell declined the invite, according to the email. But the fact that she was invited at all, the fact that she was even on a short list for something like this, what does that tell you?
It completely reinforces the core thesis of this entire deep dive. This isn't just about sex crimes. It never was just about sex crimes. It is about state secrets.
Exactly. If the partner of a sex trafficker is being considered for membership on a highly classified secret commission regarding the biggest terror attack in U.S. history, she isn't just a socialite pimp.
She's an operative.
She is an operative with security clearance level access. It strongly implies that the Epstein network was deeply, deeply embedded in the national security apparatus, not just the New York social scene.
It implies they were part of the actual infrastructure of the government, which leads us directly to the personnel. Because if GMAX is being invited to secret commissions, who else is involved in this network?
And this is where Kiriakou points a laser beam at a woman named Kathy Rumler.
Yes, this is a name everyone needs to know.
Kathy Rumley isn't a household name like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, but inside the Beltway, in D.C., she was an absolute titan. She was President Obama's White House counsel.
The president's top lawyer, the person advising the Oval Office on the most sensitive legal matters in the world.
Right, and later she left the White House and became the general counsel at Goldman Sachs.
So she goes from the highest legal office in the executive branch of the U.S. government to the highest legal office in the biggest investment bank in the world.
Okay, so we are establishing she is high status, high power, incredibly connected.
It's extremely. Now, Kiriakou notes that in these new file dumps, there are emails exchanged between Kathy Rumler and Jeffrey Epstein.
And you really have to brace yourself for this number.
Do you want to guess how many emails? I mean, if they were just friends, maybe a few hundred over the years.
11,500.
Hold on. Let me just process that out loud. 11,500 emails.
That is the exact number Kiriakou cites from the data. 11,500 emails.
I don't think I have sent 11,000 emails to my wife in our entire marriage. How does the president's top lawyer have time to send that many emails to anyone, let alone a guy who was already a registered sex offender by that point?
That is the absolute indictment of judgment that Kiriakou is talking about. It is an incomprehensible volume of communication. But honestly, it gets worse than just the numbers. It's what is in the emails.
What were they actually talking about?
Well, in one instance, Rumler sent an email to Epstein bragging, she is literally bragging, that CIA Director John Brennan gave her the CIA's highest civilian honor that day. She writes something to the effect of, pretty cool, huh?
She's seeking his validation. She's trying to impress Jeffrey Epstein.
She is. The White House counsel is trying to impress him. And then, repeatedly in these emails, she tries to set up a lunch between Jeffrey Epstein and CIA Director John Brennan.
Why? Why in the world does a convicted pedophile need to have a sit-down lunch with the director of the Central Intelligence Agency? And why is the White House counsel playing matchmaker for it?
Kiriakou has a theory on this, and he is very confident about it based on his own time working at the agency. To understand his theory, we have to understand what happens on Tuesday mornings at the White House during the Obama years.
You were talking about Terror Tuesdays.
Exactly. Terror Tuesdays. Kiriakou explains that every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., John Brennan shared the kill list meeting.
The kill list. We need to define that carefully. Because this isn't a military tribunal. This isn't a judge and a jury in a courtroom.
No, not at all. This is a group of people sitting in a conference room, usually down in the Situation Room, looking at what they call baseball cards of terror suspects.
Basically, profiles.
Profiles. And they are deciding who gets hit by a Hellfire missile from a Predator drone in places like Yemen, Pakistan, or Somalia.
And Kiriakou says this committee wasn't just a bunch of generals in uniform.
No, it was heavily populated by attorneys. Attorneys from the White House, the National Security Council, the CIA, and the Department of Justice.
Because they needed legal cover.
Exactly. Their entire job was to construct the complex legal arguments that allow the United States government to kill someone, sometimes even an American citizen, completely outside of a declared war zone.
And Kiriakou believes Kathy Rumler was sitting on that committee.
As White House counsel, it is almost a guarantee she was in that room. So, picture this reality for a second. You have a woman who is highly likely sitting at a table on Tuesday mornings deciding who lives and who dies via drone strike. She is literally signing off on kill lists.
And then what does she do?
And then she spends the rest of her week chit-chatting with Jeffrey Epstein 11,000 times.
It raises a genuinely terrifying question. Was Epstein providing intelligence for those lists?
That is the speculation Kiriakou brings straight to the table. Was Epstein acting as a broker for the targets? Was he providing the geolocation data to find these guys?
Or, and this might be even scarier, was he just so deeply embedded in the machinery of the state that the people running the kill list viewed him as a peer?
It definitely suggests he wasn't an outsider looking in. He was an insider.
An operational insider.
Yeah.
Which feeds perfectly into this concept that Kiriakou discusses next. A concept that Tucker Carlson actually brought up during their conversation. The idea of a super government.
Right. It is a complete restructuring of how we are taught to view power in the world. We all grow up with, Schoolhouse Rock. We think the president is the most powerful person in the free world.
We think the voters go to the polls and decide the direction of the country.
But Kiriakou argues that is a total illusion.
He argues that in this super government structure, the people we vote for, the presidents, the prime ministers, the senators, they are actually the peasantry.
That is such a humbling and honestly terrifying way to phrase it. The president of the United States is a peasant.
In this specific hierarchy he outlines, yes. Kiriakou breaks it down into 3 distinct tiers.
Let's walk through these tiers. Who is sitting at the very top of the pyramid?
At the top, you have the bankers and the financiers, people in groups like the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group.
So the people who hold the actual capital.
Exactly. These are the people moving the entire global economy. They control the currency supply, they set the interest rates, they operate completely across borders. They do not care about national flags or patriotism.
It's just about the money and the leverage.
The money, period. Then, below them, you have the second tier, the fixers.
Tier 2, the fixers. So this would be people like Jeffrey Epstein or the legendary arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi.
Right. These are the guys who make the dirty gears of the machine turn. They move the illicit cash around, they arrange the blackmail, they smooth over the crimes.
They essentially broker the deals that the bankers at the top want to happen but can't be seen doing themselves.
Exactly. They are the cutouts.
Yeah.
And then finally, at the bottom tier.
At the bottom, doing the bidding of the 2 groups above them are the elected officials, the peasantry.
They are the public face. Think of them as the HR department of the super government.
The HR department, that is a great analogy.
Their job is just to manage the population, keep things relatively calm, give good speeches, and ensure that the policies the bankers want actually get signed into law.
It is incredibly cynical, but when you look back at the Rumler emails, it totally fits the model. She is the elected official's lawyer, the peasantry tier seeking approval from the fixer.
Exactly. The power dynamic in those emails strongly suggests she is trying to please him. Not the other way around.
Yeah.
He wasn't begging her for favors. She was showing off for him.
Kiriakou even mentions a fascinating distinction between Davos, the World Economic Forum, and groups like the Trilateral Commission. I always thought they were basically the same crowd of elites.
He says there is a very key difference. A high-level source once told him that Davos is where these people go to talk about economic management. Climate goals, DEI initiatives.
So public-facing soft power stuff that looks good on a press release.
Right. But the Trilateral Commission and Bilderberg.
What happens behind those doors?
That is where they talk about arms deals.
Arms deals.
That is the real engine of this super government. Arms. War. Which brings us directly to the origin story. Because if Epstein is a fixer in this structure, dealing with arms and intelligence, he didn't just magically appear out of thin air in 2005.
Right. This was the part of the transcript that really blew my mind. Because I have heard the, quote, Epstein was Mossad, unquote, theory a million times. It is almost a cliche in conspiracy circles at this point.
It really is. The standard story usually goes something like, Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, was Mossad. So she was Mossad. So Epstein must have been Mossad. Case closed.
But Kiriakou updates his view here. He says Epstein wasn't just Mossad, he was an intelligence peddler.
Which is a crucial distinction. We need to define that term, because it is very different from being a formal intelligence officer.
An intelligence officer works for a specific government. They have a flag on their shoulder, metaphorically speaking. They swear an oath to a nation.
But an intelligence peddler.
They are brokers. They aren't loyal to any one flag.
They are essentially mercenaries.
Exactly. They collect information from everyone. They get dirt on the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, the Saudis, the Israelis, and then they sell it to the absolute highest bidder, or they trade it for favors and protection.
And Kiriakou traces this peddling back much further than most people realize. He takes us all the way back to the 1980s, to the Iran-Contra affair.
This completely changes the timeline. Usually, whenever you read a mainstream article about Epstein, the story starts with his time at Bear Stearns or in the early 90s, but Kiriakou points to direct connections with Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese.
Let's put some faces to these names for the listener. Who are they?
Adnan Khashoggi was basically the Saudi arms dealer of the 20th century. If you ever saw an action movie about a ridiculously rich arms dealer in the 80s, the character was probably based on him.
He had the yachts, the parties, the whole lifestyle.
Oh, yeah. And he was the uncle of Dodi Fayed, who died in the car crash with Princess Diana and Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist who was murdered by the Saudis in the consulate in Istanbul.
So there is a deep family legacy of incredibly high-stakes international drama there.
Without a doubt. Adnan was the ultimate fixer of his era. He was the guy who could walk into any royal palace in the Middle East. He connected the Western intelligence agencies to the Saudi royals.
Okay. And Douglas Leese.
Douglas Leese was a British arms dealer and defense contractor, a very shadowy figure operating in the UK defense world. Kiriakou strongly suggests that a young Jeffrey Epstein was likely subcontracting for these guys back in the 80s.
Okay, so for you listening who might not remember 11th grade history class, or maybe you weren't even born yet, can you give us the explain, like, I'm 5 version of Iran-Contra? Why does that specifically matter here?
Sure. It is a completely wild story. In the 1980s, the U.S. government, specifically the Reagan administration, really wanted to fund a group called the Contras.
Who were they?
The Contras were a rebel group in Nicaragua fighting the Sandinista government, which had communist ties. Reagan wanted to stop the spread of communism in Latin America at all costs.
But there was a major legal problem.
Right. Congress passed something called the Boland Amendment, and it basically said, no, Mr. President, you cannot give the Contras any money. It is illegal to fund them.
So they couldn't legally fund the rebel.
Exactly. So the Reagan administration, specifically folks in the National Security Council and the CIA, came up with a workaround, a wildly illegal, covert workaround.
What did they do?
They decided to secretly sell missiles, TOW, anti-tank missiles, to Iran.
Wait, just to make sure we're on the same page. Iran was our enemy. They had just recently taken American hostages.
Yes. But Iran desperately needed weapons for their brutal war against Iraq. So the U.S. secretly sold weapons to the bad guys in Iran.
And what did they do with the money from those missile sales?
They took the profits from those sales completely off the books, and they funneled that cash directly to the Contras in Nicaragua.
So let me get this straight. Selling arms to our enemies, to secretly fund rebels in another country, all while actively lying to the U.S. Congress.
Exactly. It was a massive, messy, highly illegal web. And to pull it off, it required moving massive amounts of money totally off the books.
You can't just write a check for that.
No. It required non-official cover operatives, people who do not look like government agents. They needed guys in nice suits to move planes, secure fake passports, set up offshore shell companies, and launder the cash.
And here is a crazy detail. Ronald Reagan's own autobiography actually blames Israel as the, quote, prime mover, unquote, in that whole deal.
He does. He explicitly says the initial idea came from the Israelis. So look at the recipe we have here. You have a covert operation involving Israel, high-level global arms dealing, illegal money movement, and shadowy fixers operating in the 1980s.
And suddenly Jeffrey Epstein is in the mix with the exact players involved in that underground world, Khashoggi and Leese.
Kiriakou's theory is that Epstein was providing the cover for these transactions.
Like financial cover?
Maybe he was moving the money. Maybe he was providing the legitimate businessman front to set up the bank accounts. But the ultimate point is Epstein wasn't just a nobody from Coney Island who got lucky playing the stock market.
He was vetted early on.
He was vetted by the NSC, the CIA, and the White House structures way back in the Reagan era.
And this explains the protection mechanism that Kiriakou talks about. Because I think a lot of people, when they look at the Epstein case, they wonder, how did he get away with it for so incredibly long?
It comes down to compartmentalization. Kiriakou describes a very plausible scenario. Let's say a rank-and-file FBI agent or a mid-level CIA officer stumbles across Epstein doing something incredibly shady in, say, 1995.
They see suspicious offshore money transfers. They start to open a case file.
Right. And then what happens? They run his name through the system to do a background check, and the system flags it.
And then the White House or the NSC steps in.
They step in and say, stop. He is with us. He is part of a sanctioned classified operation. Leave him alone.
He's with us.
And because of that command from on high, no file is ever opened. There is no paper trail created. That is exactly how you operate in the shadows for 40 years. You don't need to be the president's best friend. You just need to be useful to the people above the president.
The people moving the arms.
Exactly. And there is actually a smoking gun for this timeline theory, isn't there? The FOIA request.
Yes. This is a critical detail that completely gets overlooked in the mainstream coverage. When Epstein was jailed in 2019, right before he died, he filed a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request on himself.
Usually if you are in trouble and you do that, you'd ask for all files. Give me everything you have on me.
Right. But he didn't ask for everything. He specifically asked the government for files from the years 2000 to 2014.
He knew exactly where the bodies were buried.
He was signaling them. He was specifically looking for files from the Bush and Obama years. He was implicating the intelligence agencies during the absolute height of the war on terror.
He knew they had files on him from that specific period, probably related to the blackmail rings or the intelligence brokering.
Yeah.
And he was trying to use the legal system to force them to admit it publicly.
It was a warning shot across the bow. He was essentially saying, I know you have files on me from this period. Release them, or I am going to start talking.
And shortly after he filed that request, he was dead.
Which brings us to the inevitable end of that particular story.
Mm.
The death of Jeffrey Epstein. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Did he escape?
Kiriakou has a very unique perspective here, simply because he has actually been inside the federal prison system as an inmate.
Right. He served nearly 2 years in federal prison for his whistleblowing. So he knows the smells, the sounds, the actual daily procedures of these places.
He approaches this first as a kind of morbid thought experiment.
He gives us a how-to guide on faking a death.
He does. He says, okay, imagine you are the super government. You need to extract Epstein from that jail cell, but you need the whole world to think he's dead. How do you actually do it?
Walk us through his theory on that.
First, you obviously need a body. Maybe it's a double who looks remarkably like him. Or maybe it's a high-end silicone cadaver. Kiriakou notes that these silicone bodies exist for medical training in Hollywood movies, and they are incredibly disturbingly realistic.
So you have the fake body, then what?
You march that body out on a gurney right in front of everyone.
You don't try to sneak it out the back door.
No, you hide it in plain sight. You let the security cameras see the profile. You let the public and the paparazzi see the photo as it's loaded into the ambulance. You establish the visual narrative immediately.
And
Then, the crucial step, you cremate the body immediately.
because once it's ash, there's no DNA test. There is no exhumation later on. No chance for an independent second opinion.
Precisely. If you control the coroner and you control the crematorium, the evidence of the swap is gone in an hour. It's the perfect crime.
And this is a really big, but Kiriakou doesn't actually think that's what happened.
No. He entertains the extraction theory because it's interesting, but he firmly leans toward the conclusion that Epstein is actually dead. Whether it was suicide or a targeted murder, he believes the man is gone.
And his reasoning for that is terrifyingly simple.
It is. He says the federal prison system is just way too incompetent to pull off a highly coordinated fake death extraction.
He is pretty brutal about the staff. He calls the guards untrained and illiterate.
He is unforgiving about it. He said that when he was in his unit, the prisoners often had to do mail call themselves because the guards literally could not read the cursive writing on the envelopes.
That is insane.
He describes a system that is fundamentally broken, massively understaffed, and completely chaotic.
And the technology is garbage. We all heard about the camera's, quote, glitching, unquote, outside Epstein's cell the night he died. People immediately shouted, conspiracy.
But Kiriakou says, no, that's just Tuesday in a federal lockup.
He mentions that cameras in federal prison are always broken, or they're taping over themselves every 24 hours because literally nobody in the building knows how to operate the DVR system.
The glitch happens every single day. He says if you go into any federal prison in the country right now, Half the cameras simply do not work.
To illustrate this incompetence and the sheer danger of it, he told a story that honestly turned my stomach. The story about a guy named Truck.
Yeah, this is highly graphic, but it is entirely necessary to understand the environment Epstein was in. Truck was a serial killer housed in Kiriakou's unit, a massive, incredibly scary guy.
And there was a pedophile in that same unit.
Right. There was a pedophile who just wouldn't stop talking. He was annoying everyone, bragging about his crimes, just being loud and obnoxious.
So what did Truck do about it?
Truck calmly went to the commissary. He bought several bottles of ordinary olive oil. He put them in the microwave in the common area, and he nuked them until the oil was completely boiling, superheated.
He just had access to a microwave. No supervision whatsoever.
None. Zero. Then he walked directly into the pedophile's cell while the man was sleeping and poured the boiling oil all over his face.
Oh my God.
The man's face essentially melted off. It was horrific. But the broader point Kiriakou is making here is not just about the extreme violence. It is about the opportunity.
This happened because the guards were asleep, absent, or just totally indifferent.
Exactly. So if a prisoner can microwave oil and melt a guy's face off without a single guard noticing or stopping it, someone could definitely sneak into Jeffrey Epstein's cell.
In that environment of total chaos and apathy, anything is possible. You do not need a grand Ocean's 11-style break-in to kill Epstein.
You just need a guard who is looking at his phone, a camera that hasn't worked since 2004, and a few minutes of opportunity.
So it comes down to the Mexican standoff theory. Epstein had blackmail mutually assured destruction on the CIA or the White House. He paid his tax and intelligence information to stay in business. But eventually, he just became way too toxic.
The liability finally outweighed the asset. And in the intelligence world, when an asset becomes a liability, they're discarded. Coldly and quickly.
Let's look at the web of complicity that actually survived him, though.
Yeah.
Because Epstein is gone, but the network clearly remains. Kiriakou brings up some names that really bridge the gap between tech, finance, and politics.
The first one being Steve Bannon.
This is such a weird connection. We all know Bannon as the political populist, the architect of the MAGA movement.
Right. But Kiriakou reminds us that Bannon has a very strange, eclectic past. He actually worked with Brock Pierce, the Mighty Ducks child actor, turned crypto billionaire on a massive World of Warcraft gold farming operation in China.
Wait, gold farming? Like in the video game? I remember hearing about that.
Yes. For those who don't play video games, gold farming is where you set up a digital sweatshop. You hire people in low-income countries to play a game for 16 hours a day, collecting digital currency or gold, which you then sell to players in the US for real-world money so they can buy virtual swords and armor.
It's super weird, and it's highly exploitative. But how on earth does this connect back to Jeffrey Epstein?
Bannon acted as a PR strategist for Epstein after his initial conviction.
After he was a registered sex offender?
Yes. There are credible reports of Bannon filming hours and hours of documentary footage with Epstein in his New York townhouse. Bannon was actively trying to rehabilitate Epstein's public image.
Why? What does a guy like Steve Bannon get out of helping a convicted pedophile?
That is the million-dollar question. Information, access to elite circles, money. Maybe Epstein was secretly funding some of Bannon's projects, it is unclear. But it shows that Epstein's tentacles went into the alt-right architecture just as deeply as they went into the Clinton Global Initiative.
He played both sides of the aisle effortlessly.
Always. And then there's Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, the guy who founded Palantir.
There's an email exchange Kiriakou mentions where Epstein tells Thiel that, quote, Brexit is just the beginning, unquote.
And Thiel replies and asks, the beginning of what? And Epstein replies, the collapse. He literally says, finding things on their way to collapse is easier than finding the next bargain.
Finding things on their way to collapse, that is a chilling philosophy to live by.
It is the exact philosophy of the super government bankers. They do not build value, they short the market, they bet heavily on destruction.
They profit from the chaos.
Exactly.
Right.
Whether it is an entire country collapsing or a national currency failing, they are sitting there ready to pick the carcass clean. This is disaster capitalism at its absolute peak.
We also have to talk about the alliance with Israel here. We touched on it briefly with Iran-Contra, but the modern connection is even more blatant in Kiriakou's analysis.
Right. And Kiriakou is very firm on this point. The Mossad and the CIA are not friends. They are intense rivals.
Which really shocks people, because we always think of Israel as our closest ally in the region. We assume we share everything.
Diplomatically, sure, we are allies. But intelligence-wise, They spy on us aggressively. They want our defense tech, they want our diplomatic secrets, and the Epstein case is the perfect example of this shadow war.
Because emails show that the Israeli government actually helped Epstein with his properties.
So specifically, under the guidance of former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, they helped install security systems at Epstein's apartment in New York.
Security systems, like burglar alarms.
Not just alarms, cameras. High-definition cameras hidden in the bathrooms, sensors everywhere.
Why would the former Prime Minister of Israel be personally helping a disgraced financier install hidden cameras in his bathroom?
Kiriakou's implication is crystal clear. This was a state-sponsored honeypot operation.
Explain what a honeypot is for the listener.
A honeypot is a classic, old-school intelligence trap. You use sex, or the promise of sex, to lure a target into a highly compromising situation. You film it, you gather the undeniable evidence, and then you own them.
Blackmail.
Total blackmail. You can force them into giving you classified secrets, voting a certain way on foreign aid, or granting lucrative defense contracts.
So the working theory here is that Epstein's entire operation was basically a massive blackmail collection facility running on American soil,
Yeah.
managed by a foreign power.
Exactly. And because of that protection mechanism we discussed earlier, because Epstein was useful to our side too, or perhaps because our side was also being blackmailed by him, it was allowed to happen right out in the open.
It is honestly overwhelming. It feels like the walls are closing in when you hear all this laid out. You realize how deep the rock goes.
Yeah.
But Kiriakou warns that we cannot just get lost staring at the past.
Right, because the machine is still running.
Because there's a massive distraction happening right now. He drops some very serious, fresh intel about Iran.
This is the fresh intel that really shifts the tone of the conversation. Kiriakou claims a definitive decision has already been made in Washington to attack Iran.
Wait, an actual war? Like boots on the ground or missile strikes?
An actual kinetic attack. He says the president gave Iran a 10-day ultimatum to completely dismantle their missile program.
10 days is nothing in diplomacy.
It's impossible. And according to Kiriakou's sources deep in the intelligence community, the attack is planned regardless of their compliance. It's a done deal. The ultimatum is just theater.
He mentions the political alignment on this, too. He sees a real split in the current landscape that doesn't follow normal party lines.
He sees a distinct anti-war faction right now, featuring people like J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard, people who are highly skeptical of foreign intervention and endless wars.
But then he sees a very powerful pro-war faction actively pushing this.
Led by Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and crucially, the new Joint Chiefs of Staff.
That is a key detail. The Trump administration fired the old Joint Chiefs and installed loyalists. Kiriakou argues the institutional brakes on war are completely gone now.
Right. Usually the generals in the Pentagon are the ones saying, Mr. President, this is a terrible idea. Here are the logistical nightmares and the body counts. But if the generals are all yes men who owe their jobs to the administration, the road to war is smoothly paved.
And Kiriakou thinks the timing of all this is incredibly cynical. He outright calls it wag the dog.
Wag the dog. It's a reference to that 90s movie where a president starts a totally fake war to distract the media from a domestic sex scandal.
And Kiriakou points to the news cycle right now to prove it. Suddenly, the government is teasing UFO files and alien disclosure again.
I saw that just yesterday. Alien motherships are back in the headlines. Senate hearings on UAPs.
Kiriakou views this as a classic textbook distraction technique. When the domestic scandals like the Epstein files dropping or severe economic trouble get too hot for the establishment to handle, you start a war. Or you talk about aliens.
You dangle a very shiny object so the public stops looking at the jerky emails and the kill lists.
It distracts everyone from the real motive, the profit motive.
Which brings us right back to the start, the Pentagon budget. Kiriakou says, and I quote, "The big club is an arms dealing club."
Because every single congressional district in America has a defense contract tied to it. Jobs depend on it.
He tells a story about David Rockefeller that sums this entire corrupt system up perfectly. The Bahrain story.
Yes. This story ties the whole supergovernment theory together beautifully. So Kiriakou was a young CIA officer stationed in Bahrain, and he was assigned to be David Rockefeller's control officer for a visit.
And David Rockefeller, I mean, he is the name. He founded the Trilateral Commission. He is the absolute top of the pyramid.
The peak of the banker tier.
Right. So Kiriakou thought Rockefeller was just there to accept some meaningless fancy award from a local bankers association. He actually complains to his station chief. He says, "This is a waste of my time. Why am I babysitting a billionaire banker?"
And his boss just laughs at him.
He laughs and says, "John, you're supposed to be the smart one." Rockefeller wasn't there for a crystal trophy. He was acting as a secret back-channel messenger to Saddam Hussein.
A private banker acting as a diplomatic envoy to a dictator.
Worse, he was flown on a United States military transport plane, a C-130 or something similar, all the way to Baghdad just to deliver a personal warning to Saddam.
A private citizen. A banker. Delivering war warnings to a foreign dictator and using the U.S. military as his personal taxi service.
That is the super government in action. That image right there. The elected officials are just the peasantry ensuring the bankers get to their meetings on time. The military exists to protect the financial interests of the Trilateral Commission, not necessarily the safety of the voters.
So where does this actually leave us? We have gone from a fake Lincoln turd at a bizarre auction to a very real shadow commission operating above the law.
We've seen that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't an anomaly. He wasn't a glitch in the system. He was a feature. He was a necessary gear in a global machine that runs entirely on blackmail, arms deals, and intelligence brokering.
He was the ultimate interface between the fixers and the peasantry.
It is a really dark journey, I know. But Kiriakou's main message here is that we have to keep looking at the glitch. We have to look closely at the sloppy emails, the broken security cameras, the seemingly random connections between tech billionaires and political operatives.
Because that's exactly where the truth leaks out. It leaks out in their incompetence. It leaks out when they get so arrogant they stop covering their tracks.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today.
We have established today that fixers like Epstein eventually get discarded or killed when they become liabilities. We have established that presidents are, in this worldview anyway, just the peasantry.
So the real question is, who is actually sitting at the head of the table when the kill list is written?
Exactly. And if the Epstein files are never fully released, if those 3 million documents remain hidden in a vault somewhere, are those exact same people still running the show right now? Are we looking at a history book today, or are we looking at a mirror of our current reality?
That is the question that is going to keep me up at night.
Stay curious, always question the official narrative, and keep looking for the glitch. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Until next time.